Good morning, everyone. Good morning for those who are watching us via the internet as well. It's a pleasure and a blessing to have you all here today. So today we are going to have a lecture called Calling the Spiritual World that will be presented by our friend Tiago. But before that, we are going to have our initial reading and initial prayer by our friend Patrick.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we are reading a passage from the book Happy Life, written by Divaldo Franco and dictated by the spirit of Joana de Angelis. When a man decides to modify his moral conduct for the better, he seems to face a general conspiracy against his desire for improvement. Everything changes and is out of control. The least little things become complicated, and the rhythm of events change for the worse for some time. This state of affairs leads the person who would improve himself to retreat and give up. Every transfer modifies what is usual. In the area of moral actions, the reaction is the greater because one is penetrating to the root of evil to cut it out. This leads to the growth of new and balanced customs. Do not abandon your goals of morality and inner growth because of the first difficulties you encounter. So let's now close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, thank Him and thank the good spirits that work here at TSS for the opportunity to be here another day, and ask them to involve our friend Tiago and everyone here so we can get everything from this lesson today. Thank you, and so be it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's very good to be here. Good to see you all. Good morning for everybody on the internet. And today we are talking about something very important for Spiritism. Well, I think everything that we talk here is important for Spiritism, and that is no exception. Just came to mind, so no exception. When we talk about Spiritism, we talk about that science and that philosophy and that way of investigating and understanding and comprehending the spiritual world, its laws, how it works, our relationship with it, our relationship between the spiritual world and the material world, and how that interaction happens. And it happens in many different ways. First of all, we are spirits. Therefore, our relationship with the spiritual world is really, really intimate, natural, I would say. All of us have the potential to communicate and to connect and to receive the influence of the spiritual world. But also this can be done intentionally. This can also be done in a way that has purpose. And that's the way that we're going to reflect about that communication and that interaction between the two planes of existence. And that title, I believe, is important as well, because when we talk about calling the spiritual world, we can try to make it in a way that, it doesn't stay only restricted to a religion or to a faith or to one specific method. But when we talk about calling the spiritual world, we are talking about something that we do almost instinctively. When we have some trouble or some difficulty, don't we sometimes say, oh my God, help me? Aren't we calling the spiritual world in that moment? Even if we don't intentionally call it, we are somehow mentally asking for something, asking for help, asking for light, asking for guidance, for north, for some sort of inspiration. Sometimes the words escape from our mouths, so we, try to find those words. But usually we do that. We do that constantly. And there is a reason for that. And there is a story for that. We're not doing that in the past century after Spiritism happened. As humans, we call the spiritual world since we understand ourselves as humans. Instinctively, we call the spiritual world because instinctively we do have that relationship. Our spirits understand that that relationship never ended, even though we came to earth, even though we are now occupying a material body. So let's try to understand and somehow put in context, in perspective, that idea of talking or calling the spiritual world. So then we can try to make sense then when Spiritism comes to our lives. And what is the understanding that we gain about that phenomenon? Understand, does it work? Does it not? What are the purposes? Why do we do that? Historically, why do we do that? And also, how we do that. And I think Spiritism helps us a lot on the why and on the how we call the spiritual world. That picture, in fact, is very curious. In the beginning of the 19th century, or even before that, mid 18th century, the flying tables, as they were called, were a very interesting phenomenon happening all over the world. And those reunions of people around those tables and trying to communicate with the dead, that were called the seances. Those meetings actually were, in a way, famous, but also they were a sort of a attraction in many ways for entertainment, for curiosity. It was something exotic, but not necessarily done in a way that humans would take advantage for the purpose of growth, for instance, or for some good lessons. In many ways, it would happen. Many people didn't believe that, and many people took advantage of those senses, charged good money for that. Many of them were not even real, were charlatans doing that to try to take money from those who, for many different reasons, were looking for maybe answers. I want to talk to the dead. So I would go to those meetings. Maybe many people who really had the clear, authentic intention to talk to the spiritual world were fooled during this time. So, and not only that, but we talk about pandemic, right? And during the pandemic time now, we learned a lot about the 1918 pandemic that happened of the influenza. And actually, especially in the United States, those meetings happen all over because so many deaths, as we call so many discarnations, so many people try to communicate, especially because of the pandemic of 1918. There was a boom of those meetings, especially in the United States, but in fact all over the world. There are many names that we know today that somehow made it popular, those meetings, and also made somehow popular the idea of communicating with the dead. One of them is an author that many of us know that's called Arthur Conan Doyle, that created the character Sherlock Holmes. Many of Arthur Conan Doyle's books were not about Sherlock Holmes. They were about spiritualism. They were about the communication with the spiritual world. As a matter of fact, he went to those meetings because he wanted to communicate with his son that discarnated this time. So here we have a little bit of history to somehow, give some context. This happens a lot, and usually in very specific and interesting and important times in the humanity. So if we want to really investigate the idea of talking to the spiritual world and calling the spiritual world, we are going as backwards as the 8th century before Christ, almost 1,000 years before Jesus. And here we have the Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was a shrine to the god Apollo. And it was in the city of Corinth. We know that city, right? Remember the letters that Apostle Paul wrote there as well? Just leave it there. So the Oracle was a place of mystical properties for those back in the time. And there were goat herders that were possessed there, and they would develop their ability to see the past and to see the future and communicate with other people. So here we have some of the, first especially in the Western civilization, that memories and the records of the idea of communication with the beyond and receiving communications and seeing the future and seeing the past and communicating this with people. And what started happening? People started going to the oracle to ask questions and to know about the reasons why things happen in the past, and also to get to know about future, their future, the future of many other things. We're going there as well in a minute. And also, in some point, there was a transition simply from those pastors that would have developed that ability for a woman that was elected by the villagers to be the representative, let's say the liaison, to receive those divine inspirations. And there she is. And she was called the Pythia. She was a priestess. She was an intermediary to communicate with the gods and give the messages from the gods to those who would go to the oracle to ask questions and to know about things, about anything. And that is a very important point. Remember the purpose that we're talking about? Why? People would go there to ask about anything. About their future, about their success, about their relationships, about their marriage, about their businesses, about their endeavors, about their social status, absolutely everything. To ask for counsel. What can I do to win battles? If you look at the mythology, how many people went to the oracles to know about the future of entire nations? Pieces of Greek mythology talk exactly about that. The presence of the oracle, it was incredibly ostensive in those literatures because people relied on the counsel of the spiritual world to make their decisions, to understand their faith. Here we have, for such a long time, we are communicating with the spiritual world for many different purposes. She was believed to be, and that is something that happens in the old scriptures a lot, the women, the virgins, right? But here we are talking about virgin in the sense of purity. There must be somebody that is pure in heart, that doesn't have malice, that doesn't have negative intentions. For us who try to understand a little more about spiritism, the relationship between us and the spiritual world, don't we say constantly here, for us to connect with the good spirits, what do we need to do? We need to have good thoughts. We need to have we need to cultivate positive, healthy, good habits, thoughts, feelings, self-awareness. That is the little message here, the inner growth, the change of habits. So here we have that symbol. When we talk about the Virgin, and here we can think even about the Virgin Mary, right? Mary had a child. Mary bore a child. Was Mary a virgin in the way that science talks about today? No, she was pure. She was very, very illuminated, superior spirit. She had the purity in her heart. Just somebody with the purity of heart to welcome Jesus through their own being, right? Here we have somebody that would need to cultivate very positive, good feelings, thoughts, and habits in order to communicate with the good and healthy and positive and superior spirits, to receive and to communicate good messages. Here we have again, instinctively, the idea that we need to look at ourselves and be aware of our own thoughts and our feelings in order to cultivate a positive presence of the spirits in our lives. But then, in some point in humanity, there was a sanction, there was a prohibition, wasn't it? In some point, we heard that we were not supposed to do that anymore. And we have lots of references of that prohibition in the Old Testament, full of those references. Who prohibited people from speaking with the spirits? Moses. Moses grew up in Egypt, and he knew the purpose of the people in communicating with the spirits. They would then they would prohibit the people back in the time, especially those who followed Moses out of slavery. So they would stop having those habits of making sacrifices, communicating with the dead, doing their fortune telling, right? And he's there in the Leviticus is very clear, right? Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I'm the Lord your God. So here we have, during a very important time in humanity, that's a lot of reference that we draw from when we are then thinking about the development of what we call the Christianity. The Old Testament is the foundation of Christianity. And it's not a coincidence that many Christian faiths today still talk a lot about the idea that we're not supposed to leave the dead there alone. They're gone. Don't do that. There is a lot of criticism against Spiritism exactly because of the idea of communicating with the spiritual world. Again, there is a reason for that. Again, familiar spirits, those guides that came from the spiritual world, wizards, the demons, as they would call, which were the intelligence of the beyond. Demon was intelligence, the intelligence from the beyond. Spirits, not supposed to communicate with them. And the book of Leviticus has lots of references on that, and also in the book of Deuteronomy has also that. I would just bring one little passage because it is long. Those who consult fortune tellers, observe dreams and omens, use spells, sorceries, or enchantments, who consult those who have necromantic or Pythonic spirit. Pythonic, remember the Pythia? Pythonic is exactly that kind of communication. Or who intend to divine or inquiry of the dead in order to know the truth. Back then, they would say, those shall be put to death. They needed to be very, very strict back in the time to us, because we were there somehow. We were not very behaving during that time. We liked doing all those things. And many of the reasons why had to do with one thing that we call today immediate gratification. We are evolving. Back then, we were very much driven by immediate gratification. That's why we were primitives. We were much more driven by instinct, by certain impulses that were closer to our family of the, animality than the humanity that we are striving to be today. Therefore, let's think about the reasons exactly why then the prohibition happened. First of all, there were lots of sacrifices. The spirits would ask for sacrifices. Many of the humans developed those rituals as well, as if through the sacrifices they would please the gods. And they would sacrifice other humans for that. Inquiry about future matters, right? And we're going to understand why is this not necessarily a good idea, but I think we may have some ideas why not, right? Can we trust blindly everybody that we talk to? We may go walk on the street and ask for questions. Are they going to tell the truth? Even if you ask for the time, their clock might be wrong. You may be late for something. Imagine communicating with the invisible world through intermediaries. What is the guarantee? Today we understand that we created the conditions for better guarantees, and we're going there as well. That's why today we do communicate with the spiritual world. Sorceries and dark magic. And here we have a lot of those intentions that not necessarily were positive, but they were against others. I want to do some sort of spell, not to have something good, but to do something bad to others. And probably feel better because my hands are clean. But let the spiritual world do the job for us. Evoking the dead. Back then also, the idea of evoking the dead was something that shouldn't be done because they are gone. Leave them dead. Leave them alone. And consulting with mediums. And again, mediums, let's remember, medium is all of those individuals that have that ability to communicate and to see and to hear, receive messages from the spiritual world. Again, We all have that ability. Some of us were born with more intense and ostensive abilities, some less, some more on the level of inspiration, some with the ability to perceive with our own eyes, to hear the voices, to feel their presence, to understand their thoughts. But like all of us, many of the mediums might not have the best intentions in making those communications and in offering this ability to others to take advantage. Allan Kardec in the book Heaven and Hell talks a lot about it, because the Heaven and Hell book exactly talks about the communication of spirits that departed from the material world would then talk through the mediums to us about their state in the spiritual world, and also help us to understand the kind of life that we are living today in order to arrive in the spiritual world better, happier. Let me see if I can, yeah. You know, the Hebrew lawgiver, here Allan Kardec is talking about Moses. He wanted his people to abandon all the costumes they had acquired while in Egypt, remember? Where evocations were in use and were subjected to abuse. For political reasons, Moses thus had to inspire the Hebrew people's aversion to all the costumes that had points of contact with the ones acquired in Egypt. Here, Allan Kardec, and again, the Spiritism gives us the key to understand many of those historical points, and even helping us to understand why did the prohibition happen if today in Spiritist Center we talk so much about mediumship and communication with the spirits. But there was a reason. He wanted to educate people. But back then, the first way to educate is let's remove everything that is bad. So then one day, and probably he knew that one day this will come back, but not now. His job was to eliminate the bad habit, so then to leave the room for new habits to be acquired. And if we think symbolically, let's think about it. When we look at the Old Testament, and I think most of the Spiritist lecturers around the world talk about it, it is very important that we understand the symbology and a more broad understanding even of those experiences. If we look about Old Testament and New Testament, can we look at ourselves from that perspective? The old habits and the new habits, the old human and the new human. Symbolically, the Old Testament and the New Testament are us, are the symbol of our own habits, acquired, developed, and mastered through centuries and centuries and centuries. When we talk about the people who were enslaved in Egypt, can we think about ourselves enslaved by our own old habits that are difficult to abandon? Can we think about the need for us to purify? And one of the other ways to say that is to cleanse, to clear ourselves from those old habits in order for new habits to be acquired, developed, and mastered. However, here we look at people after the prohibitions. We look at people starting to receive very important messages coming from very special human beings from that time until the time that Jesus arrives on earth. We started only being allowed to receive messages from the prophets. Slowly, the idea of communicating with the dead starts returning in scattered ways and then in more organized ways, and then the prophets start coming, and people start understanding that, wait a minute, for us to receive those messages, we need to receive those messages from very specific, they call special humans. And that we call them the prophets. But then Jesus comes and walks among us and gathers his disciples, chooses his apostles. And one day, there it is in the chapter 10 of the book of the Apostle Matthew, he goes and he says, he calls the 12 and he gave them authority to over the unclean spirits, to clean the spirits, to cast the demons out of people, and to heal every disease. In the verse 8, that is a very pungent and important sentence from Jesus himself. He would tell the apostles, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. Isn't Jesus telling the apostles, use their ability to communicate? How do they know that there are unclean spirits influencing another person? Casting out the demons. Are they able to communicate with those demons? Who are the demons? The intelligences of the beyond. Probably suffering. Negative spirits that were influencing the people back then. And we see in the New Testament constantly Jesus talking to the spirits, Jesus talking to those who were possessed, as they would call, by several negative spirits, several what we call the obsessors, right? The ones influencing negatively others. Wasn't that a prohibition? There was a prohibition. But remember, Jesus comes to us and says, I have not come to erase the old laws. I have come to somehow update those laws, to give the application. But which application is that? Moses, as the one who needed to clear out the space for the new life and the new habits and the new way to be. For Jesus, when he comes to us, he would say, now we can do that, but with a very different intention. Jesus never tells the apostles, go, clean the unclean spirits, ask for the 6 numbers on the lotto, 49, 649, and bring them back to us. So then we're going to have lots of possessions. We're going to be rich so that we can help others. Is that what Jesus said? No. Immediately, when using the ability to communicate with the spiritual world, Jesus shows the way that it needs to be done for everybody's improvement. The idea of casting out spirits, today we know that may not be written on the scriptures, but Jesus didn't simply cast out spirits and let them continue being the way that they were. Jesus never helped somebody and just told them, just, go away. No. Always he would say things like, sin no more. What does that mean? Change your ways. Change your ways so this doesn't happen to you again. Change, better your pattern of thoughts, the way that you cultivate your feelings, your relationships, your intentions. Put in check your impulses and instincts. Otherwise, you will continue to be influenced by the same quality and level of spirits and influences that you have been so far. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Question. Today, after Moses, after Jesus, here we are. 2024. The question remains, can we evoke spirits? Can we communicate with them? Is it okay if we do that? And already in around 1858, 59, Allan Kardec asks to the spirits, can we evoke spirits? As if they were asking the spirits, can I keep evoking you? Is that okay with what I am doing? He was very clever. Can I continue doing what I'm doing? He used to do that constantly. And they would say, yes. You know, spirits can communicate spontaneously by answering your call, which means they can be evoked. We can evoke the spirits. Allan Kardec actually recommends that the spirits will be evoked, will be called instead of letting them show up, for a very important reason. First of all, back then it was important for them developing those spiritist meetings, creating the societies. It was important that they put their intentions on those events, not allowing necessarily any spirit to communicate that not necessarily would have the best of the intentions as well, who would probably come and be frivolous and bring falsehoods, but instead they would be very intentional calling the spirits in order to learn from them. And they have very specific questions to the spirits that needed to be answered for the benefit of humanity. And also we know as well, we are constantly influencing and being influenced by spirits. We can then create intentionally a bond with them. We can create a bond with the spirits. But they will bond with us based on the frequency of thoughts and feelings that we attune ourselves with. They will, let's say, match. They will match. Therefore, it is important that we are intentional when we do that. When we want to communicate with a particular spirit, it is absolutely necessary to evoke it. Without that intention, we will not know if those communications are arriving from those who intend to receive the communications from. It was a preoccupation that they had with that kind of communication. And also, Allan Kardec would say, when a spirit is not present, they will have a representative. And it's important for us to understand and to demystify somehow the idea of the spiritual world. You know, how many times we try to meet with somebody that say they're not here, but they sent you a message. You know, the parent goes away, needs to go shopping, the kid is there at home, they leave a little message, right? Tell them I'm not, you know, I can't, but that is the message, right? Tell your dad to buy bread, you know, if they call, things like that. In the spiritual world, we do that, but differently, right? It is because of what kind of communication, the intention. If we want to know about important lessons from the beyond, which kind of lesson we may have, you know, if I keep living the way that I'm living, you know, how's going to be my life in the spiritual world? If I'm overly attached to material possessions, am I taking those possessions? You know, what are the feelings that are more important for me to cultivate than others? You know, Um, I'm having very conflicting relationships with members of my family. Is there something that I can do about it? Should I just abandon anyone? Should I continue fighting no matter what? If somebody offends me, what should I say? Then the questions start changing because the intention starts changing. The purpose for this communication starts changing. Consequently, what changes as well? The answer, the message, and the lesson, and the warning, and the guidance, and the alerts. And then we start seeing a shift in the purpose and quality of that interaction, communication with the spiritual world as well. Now, it's just because we want something good that we're going to receive. Again, we are talking about there is an intention and there are conditions. Communicating with the spiritual world is something that's not supposed to be done frivolously, out of pure curiosity. It's something that needs to be done seriously. And Spiritism will help us a lot to understand how to do that in a way that we are making sure that we are attentive to so many influences to those communications. First of all, the one that we call the medium. Remember, the Pythia needed to develop qualities of purity, right? If we think about the mediums are those with that ability that are more intensive, that use that to communicate with the spiritual world. It is important that the mediums themselves cultivate very good energy, good thoughts, good feelings, good habits. That do that in a way that is also serious, protected, right? The ones who evoke the spirits, right? More elevated the intention, more chances we receive better communications. Less serious the intention, less serious is the answer, because the spirits will match the intention of the evoker. Again, we can ask about immediate things, mundane subjects, material possessions, success, right? All of that is perishable. Or we can ask about things that are of the spirit, as we would say, the matters of the spirit. The availability of the spirit. How many times we may be evoking a spirit that already reincarnated? Maybe we may be evoking a spirit that, because of their elevation, their superiority, may not directly answer our questions. But again, they may send a representative. They may not be available because the spirits are way busier than us. Different than many may think that they are just there sitting on clouds and playing lyre and, worshiping, God. Actually, they are worshiping, but not that way. They are making music, but a different kind of music. Symbolically, they are making the worlds more sound, better. And the idea of sitting on top of a cloud, it is the bliss of the happy spirits that no matter what, they're happy. No matter the difficulties, they know that the good will come. They are happy because they drove all the way to happiness themselves, and they will never forget those qualities. And they will always cultivate that happiness because they are closer to the source. They are closer to God. Remember, the symbology is important. Spiritism is helping us to unveil all of that. The nature of the spirit, obviously. If we are looking to immediate answers for immediate matters, we're going to probably welcome spirits that are usually connected to those immediate matters as well, that are closer to us as incarnates than to the spiritual world itself. And here there is one important phrase that is very well known as well from one of Jesus' apostles. In one of his letters, John, the evangelist, said, right? Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirit to see whether they are from God. From there, Allan Kardec took the criteria to analyze and to evaluate spiritual communications. The universal consensus that Allan Kardec calls. Right? It is better to reject 1,000 truths than to let in one lie or one falsehood. Allan Kardec knew, if I reject the truth today, it will come back tomorrow. The spirits will find a way that the truth will come back. But if I let in one falsehood, chances are that one drop of falsehood may contaminate all of us. And it may take a while for us to cleanse ourselves all over again to welcome the truth again. The environment. We may have the best of the intentions, but if the environment is not contributing, it's going to be hard. The environment that I say, where we live, the spiritual environment. If there is an environment usually surrounded by conflict, by negativity, by sadness, by anger, by resentment, it is not going to be that easy. That's why today, less and less, we see those communications happening in homes. They used to happen a lot in the homes. For those who are from Brazil, so common, right? That we would know that, there will be a meeting in so-and-so's house. Let's go on a Friday night, on a Saturday night. But today, more and more, we are bringing to a different environment, more protected, more structured, where there is also education, where there is, a lot of enlightenment about the purpose of those communications, how they happen, to bring them to a way where there is a way to also address any problems that may happen during those communications, And finally, the purpose of the evocation, the intention. That is the core, the essence of all that we're talking about. Why are we doing that? What is the intention that we have in doing that? And remember, we as spirits are here incarnated. We have the concessions that were given to us, our bodies, the food that we eat, the air that we breathe, the clothes that we wear, all the relationships that we have, each other, to grow together, to restore relationships that we almost destroyed in the past. What are we doing with those concessions? The ability to communicate with the spirits is also a concession that we have, because from there we receive a lot of good guidance for our spiritual growth, therefore understanding better the reasons why we are here and how to use better those concessions, but also putting them in perspective, understanding that we are going to leave them behind. What is our intention? Of course, Allan Kardec will constantly enlighten us, right? Today, reason predominates. Spiritism has come to show the exclusively moral, consoling, and religious purpose of relations with those beyond the grave. Here are the three special words: moral, consoling, and religious. Let's just remember, moral. Moral has to do with our conduct. Every time that is spiritism, we hear, we need to be moral people. What do we mean with that? We mean that we need to act according a more positive conduct. We need to have codes of conduct to do our businesses. We have rules for everything. There are rules for conduct. Which rules are that? Respect, tolerance, forgiveness, benevolence, indulgence, right? Loving. Those are the codes of conduct. So we need to act in that way. Treat respectfully the spirits. Treat those communications in a serious way. Consoling. We understand that many communications coming from beyond the grave are consoling to us. We have the best example that we could have. A medium that lived among us for a long time, and not long time ago, his name was Francisco Cândido Xavier. Wrote thousands and thousands and thousands of letters to mothers that lost their children. And through those communications, he was able to give consolation and hope and a little bit of solace to those who thought that they lost their loved ones forever. But those messages were a very consoling message to us. This is not forever. They live. They departed from this world, but we are waiting for you, and we will meet again. And we will continue that relationship, and we will evolve in that relationship. A consoling purpose. And the religious purpose is the one that through those communications we learn how to live better, spiritualize ourselves, and draw closer to God. There is a very important purpose for this communication. Now, finally, it is the part that we have a little manual. Let's wrap up to understand what we do not do when we talk about communicating with the dead or the spiritual world. What we don't do? We don't offer sacrifices to the gods anymore. Jesus himself told us, sacrifice I don't want. I want mercy. That's what he told us. Do not fall for curiosity or for greed. Those are not positive. Those are going to continue attaching us overly to this existence, not allowing us to move forward in our path of spirituality. We do not bother the spirits to solve problems that belong to us to solve. Very, very common. What should I do? What should I say? What path should I take? What job should I pursue? We received so much. How can we leave for others to decide? Are we afraid of the consequence? Probably. Are we unsure? That is a good opportunity to work on our indecision. If we lack confidence in ourselves, let's work on that. Or we can ask, why am I so indecisive? Probably the Spirit should say, because you were here asking me that. And we do not seek profit or material gain from communicating with the spiritual. Another message from Jesus, when he was sending the apostles, he said, freely you received, freely you give. Those are concessions that we receive from the spiritual world. Those are concessions that we receive from God. So we give. We didn't pay anything for those concessions. Don't charge for them. But then, there was a lot of do not. Let's then think about doing it. Let's think about what can we do in this matter. We do communicate with superior spirits. We do communicate to receive their wise counsel, to receive relief on behalf of those who suffer, to receive guidance to live our lives better, to act in a better way. We communicate with the spirits that are suffering. Can we communicate with those who left this existence and are in a state of suffering beyond the grave? Yes. Can we help the spirits as well and not keep waiting for the spirits to help us? Yes, we can. We can also offer consolation. We can also learn from their experiences. Many of those spirits who are suffering come back to us and say, you know what I did? They describe lots of aspects of their existence that sometimes, that's far from ours. And they tell us, and you know what happened? I'm not happy here. I suffer in many ways. I feel dependent of many material aspects that I did not need to. I feel overly attached to material lives to the point that I still cannot ascend to other planes of existence. And also we can offer them the consolation. Maybe they don't know what we know already about spiritism, about spiritual life. Many of those spirits arrive on the other side thinking that there was nothing there for them. And they see themselves alive. So we do that. We do allow communications in serious, well-organized, properly protected spiritist centers, for instance. I'm not only bringing that to spiritism because we know that without charity there is no salvation, or without spiritism there is no salvation. Every meeting, every religion, every faith, every gathering, when there is the communication with the spirits, that is done with a positive, superior, healthy purpose, is good. No matter the faith and the we are not exclusively the ones that use mediums or mediumship in order to have that communication, to learn and to teach and to share and to grow. If we are here, is because we do sympathize a little bit with spiritism, therefore we do that as well. And we also analyze communications using reason. As we said before, letting go of 1,000 truths instead of letting in one falsehood. We have the consolation purpose. We have the teaching purpose. And we have then one of the most sublime purposes of that communication. And that is a communication of the mission of the spirits, especially for us. And it was a very important passage in the Bible when the apostles see Jesus communicating with two other spirits. And those two other spirits were Moses and Elijah. And the apostles in one time, they are able to see Jesus. Actually, the passage in the Bible is called a transfiguration. They see Jesus, but Jesus much more spiritualized. And also they see Moses, the spirit, that prohibited the communications. And also Elijah, one of the prophets, all about the communication. Having a conversation. Many times I hear that. Many would say, oh, I wish I was a little bird to be there, right? To understand what the conversation was. You know what? We don't need to. Everything that we are here today doing, every single weekend, every single day that we reflect on our self-improvement, every day that we are here self-reflecting, looking for self-awareness, every time that we look at the relationships that we have, understanding the purpose of our existences, the challenges, the bliss, and the pains that we go through. we know that that conversation had absolutely everything to do with that because of the purpose, because of the intention. If we are talking about positive intention, we are talking about the most pure spirit that this earth ever seen, the governor of this planet, together with two of their councils, discussing the futures of our lives. And it is up to us to continue that and to continue making that communication be as positive and healthy and spiritualized, so we can continue honoring the spirits that we are, no matter where we are. And honoring those communications because that's who we are. That's how we actually communicate with each other. And more we strive to have that quality of communication with purpose, with meaning, and with intention, we're going to live better, and we're going to grow, and we're going to spiritualize ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thiago. Any questions, comments? No, not from the internet. Yeah, so I think it's very enlightening, as Thiago mentioned at the beginning. It's a natural connection, a natural thing we are born with. And like, to whom we connect is directly connected with our thoughts, our actions, our moral. Am I right? So this is very important, on top of, when we are prepared to have those communications, be in a safe environment, and also study and know exactly how and what we are doing. Okay, so thank you very much for those who are watching us through the internet. We are going to prepare for our passes. And so that's it. Thank you, Thiago.